Shalom, my friends. This video, we are going to explore the concept of the Messiah. What is Messianic prophecy? Where does it come from? And let's just keep it as simple as possible. So here we have 2 Samuel chapter 7. And it has a passage here where God is speaking to King David. And he says in verse 12, "And when your days are finished, you shall lie with your forefathers, and I will raise up your seed that shall precede you from your body after you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish his throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son, so that when he goes astray, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the sons of Adam. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I withdrew it from Saul, who I removed from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be confirmed forever before you, and your throne shall be established forever." Now, who is this talking about? We understand it to be King Solomon is this son, right? So what's interesting about this is the concept of the Messiah, son of David, right? The idea is that David is going to have his kingdom established through one of his sons. That is why, according to Rabbinic Judaism, we understand the Messiah, son of David, to be coming through the line of Solomon, right? And this is where it comes from. Now, a lot of Christians will apply this to Jesus and try to say that this, every time they see the word son, oh, it must be Jesus. When he goes astray, see this? When he goes astray, I will chasten him with the rod of men. So unless you want to say Jesus was a sinful man, I wouldn't touch this verse with a 10-foot pole applying it to Jesus if I were a Christian. Thank God I'm not. So we understand this is the concept of the Messiah, son of David. Solomon was the first candidate. He had a potential to be the Messiah, right? Obviously he wasn't, but there are future prophecies which describe a future son of David who will establish this kingdom ultimately in the future that Solomon started. So let's go to Hosea chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, my favorite messianic prophecy because it refutes every claim that Christians have about Jesus being the Messiah. It says, "For the children of Israel shall remain for many days, having neither king nor prince, nor sacrifice, nor pillar, nor ephod, nor teraphim." Describes the era that we live in today, right? Hosea chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. "Afterwards, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and they shall come trembling to the Lord and to his goodness at the end of days." So what we have here is once again this picture of a future messianic king who is identified separately from God. So when Christians try to claim that the Messiah is, God in the flesh and that Jesus was such God, why is Hosea chapter 3 verse 5 describing the Lord their God and David their king separately, right? Why wouldn't it say David their God if the Messiah is supposed to be God? We know that David their king, right, is the phraseology that is used to describe the future Messiah most often, right? And this is one thing that there's a misconception about is that messianic prophecies are exclusive to the Messiah in various different passages that don't mention David their king. But what I'm going to show you is that there's very few prophecies that actually mention exclusively the Messiah and no one else, right? And this would be one of them. And you can see David their king, right? Who's going to argue with that? You want to say it's a resurrected David at the end of days? Okay, I guess that's your only other option. But when we look at it in context with 2 Samuel 7, right? When it says that your kingdom will be confirmed forever through the son of David, that's ultimately through the kingdom of Solomon. And as God explicitly states here, David their king at the end of days. So that is where we get this concept of Messiah, son of David. And notice here, there's no indication that the Messiah, son of David, needs to come before the destruction of the Second Temple, as Christians like Dr. Michael Brown and Radar Apologetics and Pablo Cristiani have been trying to tell us for the past 2,000 years. That is absolute hogwash. There is no necessity for the Messiah to come before the destruction of the Second Temple. Rather, it says we will not have a king and we will not have a sacrifice. It's right here before the final exile, before the final redemption, rather. We are in the final exile now, but we won't have a sacrifice and we won't have a king or a prince, right, before the final redemption. So, we have other scriptures that corroborate with this as well, right? The same theme. This is Ezekiel chapter 37. And if you go to the end of the chapter, you have the same principle. And my servant David shall be king over them, and one shepherd shall be for all of them. And they shall walk in my ordinances and observe my statutes and perform them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given to my servant. Servant. To Jacob. Jacob's the servant. There you go. Where your forefathers lived, and they shall dwell upon it, and they and their children shall, and their children's children forever. And my servant David, who is also the servant, shall be their prince forever. And I will form a covenant of peace with them. An everlasting covenant shall be with them. And I will establish them and multiply them. And I will place my sanctuary in their midst forever, associated with the future third temple. Now, once again, you have David their king. David shall be king over them. Jews understand this to refer to the future Messianic king. Once again, you see it's consistent with Hosea chapter 3, verse 5. David their king at the end of days. David will be king, and their children and their children's children shall be my servant forever, and David shall be their prince forever. This is a future prophecy that has not happened, and when you look at it contextually, it's speaking about after the final exile, when the nations the nation of Israel is made into one nation, right? And it is under one king. That is a future prophecy that has not happened yet. Now, we see the same theme in Jeremiah chapter 30, right? Once again, you have, on that day, the Lord of hosts will break the yoke off your neck, and I will break your thongs, and strangers shall no longer enslave them. So it's a future prophecy, right? It's talking about the salvation of Jacob, right? It says that at a future time, Jacob will be saved, and they will serve the Lord their God and David their king. Deja vu. Look at that. The Lord their God and David their king. And it speaks, sorry, I went to the wrong passage, but here it says, who I will set up for them, and fear not, my servant Jacob, says the Lord, and do not be dismayed, O Israel, for behold, I save you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall again be silent and at ease, and no one will frighten them. So this is future prophecy. David, their king, coming after the final exile, not before the final exile, not before the destruction of the Second Temple, as the Christians will try and convince you. So, we can go to the most famous prophecy concerning the Messiah. Now, it doesn't mention David their king explicitly here, but we do have the stem of Jesse, right? And this speaks about that future era of world peace that once again has not happened yet, right? But it says, neither shall they destroy nor harm on my holy mount, for the land will be in full knowledge of the Lord as the water covers the seabed. Once again, a future prophecy about the root of Jesse, which stands as a banner to peoples. To him shall the nations inquire. So it's giving him a kingly status. All the nations will come to him, right? And his peace will be with honor. So, yeah, he shall raise a banner to the nations. He shall gather the lost of Israel, the scattered ones of Judah. So God is gathering all of the nations, but you have the Messiah, son of David, who is described as the stem of Jesse here, who uses the wisdom that God bestows upon him, right? He fears God, knowledge and fear of the Lord, right? Why would the Messiah be God if he's fearing God? That doesn't make any sense. So this is the future Messianic king. And you'll see that Christians have to agree. All of these passages, they have things in common with each other. David, their king, through the son of David, right? The kingdom will be established. Hosea 3:5. David, their king, at the end of days, not before the destruction of the second temple. After the ingathering of the exiles, David will be king over them, right? Ezekiel chapter 37, right? Verses 24 through 28. David, their king, that is the future Messiah. No one questions that, right? David, their king, and the Lord, their God, separately mentioned from each other, right? This is Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 9. Once again, future prophecy. Jacob will be at ease and no one will frighten them. And then you have, of course, Isaiah 11, speaking about the root of Jesse who will rule over the earth, right? That is a kingly figure. But then we go to Isaiah chapter 53. One of these is not like the other, because the servant is never described as a king or having any sort of exclusive Davidic lineage. Why is this significant? Because it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone why Jews for over 2,000 years have been championing the idea that Israel is the servant of Isaiah 53, not just the Messiah, right? If it was just the Messiah, then it would say something like David their king or David their servant, right? It's very interesting that the Christian perspective, or the Messianic perspective, whatever you want to call it, the New Testament perspective, is that this prophecy, which makes no mention of David or a king, and by the way, you can go through the entirety of the servant songs, even from like Isaiah 42 to like Isaiah 53, nowhere is the servant identified as David or even as a king explicitly. That should speak volumes to you. Now, I'll show you where the servant is. Well, okay, so actually in Isaiah 55, this is the first mention, right? If you even consider this a servant song, it says, "Incline your ear and come to me, hearken, and your soul shall live, and I will make you an everlasting covenant, the dependable mercies of David. Behold, a witness to nations I appointed him, and a ruler and commander of nations." Once again, this would be something that could be applied to the future Messiah exclusively, right? Or if you want to look at it from, a David, but there's more exclusivity to this prophecy, that it has a kingly aura of it. But when you look at Isaiah 53, let me go back to Isaiah 53, or any of the previous chapters of the servant song, literally no mention of a king. Literally no mention of David associated with this servant. Ironic, right? Because Christians will shout from the rooftops, Isaiah 53, Isaiah 53, it's about the Messiah. It's only about the Messiah. It can't be about anyone else but the Messiah. It's only about Jesus. Yet, when we compare with clear scriptures that identify the Messiah as David their king at the end of days, an everlasting covenant, my sanctuary will be in their midst forever. Their children and their children's children shall be with me forever. None of this has happened yet. They shall serve the Lord their God and David their king. No one will frighten them at this point. Has not happened yet. Jesus has not fulfilled any of this, especially Isaiah chapter 11, right? The wolf will lay with the lamb. None of this world peace has happened. Then we go to Daniel 9:26, right? The Christian favorite to go to. As I described in my debate with Radar, there is nowhere in the Tanakh where the Hebrew word Mashiach is used to refer exclusively to the Messiah, son of David. Nowhere. Daniel 9 would be the only exception to that. So when you talk about this Mashiach who is cut off, it's not the Messiah, son of David. You won't find any rabbinic commentary that says it is, because we all understand that David, their king, is the future Messiah, right? The stump of Jesse, the stem of Jesse is the future Messiah, not some generic. We're not going to use the word Mashiach. It's ironic, right? Because it is colloquially used to refer to the Messiah, son of David, in conversation, but that's not how it's identified in the Tanakh. These are not like the others. So these are just 4 messianic prophecies here. Actually 5, right? You have 2 Samuel 7 verses 12 through 14. You have, so we talk about a future Davidic king. We have Hosea chapter 3 verse 5. Future Davidic king. David their king. See that? David their king. And then we have Ezekiel. My servant David shall be king over them. Pretty simple. And then you have the Lord their God and David their king, who I will set up for them. All future prophecies, not happened yet. And a shoot shall spring forth from the stem of Jesse, who is the father of King David, right? And then it speaks again about it shall come to pass on that day that the root of Jesse, which stands as a banner to all peoples, well, that's very much in line with what is said here in Isaiah 55. He's a commander of nations, right? David. Future messianic prophecy. Compared to Isaiah 53, which has no mention of David or a king. Daniel, no mention of David. Right? It uses the word Mashiach, which can refer to even high priests. It doesn't have to refer to even Davidic king, right? It could also refer to King Cyrus, as we see in Isaiah 45. Lim Shicho, right? Refers to King Cyrus. So, that is messianic prophecy. And this is why Jews do not understand Isaiah 53 or Daniel 9 when it says Mashiach to refer to the Messiah, son of David. Because everywhere else in Scripture where we have exclusive messianic prophecy, right? At least most places. I'm not going to say every single place, but I would say the most strong indicator that a passage is exclusively speaking about the Messiah, David their king. So that's important to recognize, and that is established right here. So I hope this video has been a blessing to you. This is how messianic prophecy is understood in a more focused manner. Any prophecy in the Tanakh could be foreshadowing about the Messiah. So that's important to also recognize. So I'm not saying that a prophecy that doesn't say David their king can't be about the Messiah, but you got to question yourself. Why are you saying that Isaiah 53 is only about the Messiah when there's no mention of David or a king there? Same with Daniel 9. So it's just something to think about. We want to be consistent with our interpretation of how messianic prophecy is understood. This is where the Messiah is literally the promise from God to David that his offspring will always be kings on the throne, we have to be consistent with that. So, thank you, and God bless.